We have a collective assumption about intelligence and vulnerability to manipulation, that they exist in inverse proportion, that the smarter someone is, the harder they are to deceive, that critical thinking is a shield, that education is insulation against the mechanisms of influence. This assumption is not just wrong. It is, in a specific and demonstrable way, exactly backwards. The traits that constitute high intelligence, the capacity for abstract reasoning, the ability to construct complex narratives, the commitment to coherence and internal consistency, are precisely the traits that the most sophisticated forms of manipulation are designed to exploit. The mechanism begins with the intelligence itself. A high-functioning mind doesn't just receive information, it processes, contextualizes, and integrates it. It builds models, it finds patterns, it constructs meaning from fragments. These capacities are genuine strengths in most domains, but in the context of social manipulation, they create a specific vulnerability. The intelligent person will do the work of constructing the justification for the manipulator's position. You don't have to sell them a complete narrative. You give them a fragment, a premise, an implication, a carefully placed ambiguity, and their own cognitive architecture will complete the structure with impressive internal logic. They will convince themselves. You only had to hand them the first piece. Rationalization is the process by which the mind constructs a logical explanation for a conclusion. It was led to through no logical mean. In most people, rationalization operates to some degree. In highly intelligent people, it operates at an elite level. The more sophisticated the mind, the more sophisticated the post hoc justification it can produce for any position, including positions it arrived at through emotional manipulation, cognitive bias, or social pressure. This is not a character failure. It is the intelligence working exactly as designed, building coherent explanations in service of a process the intelligence had no input in. The reasoning is sound. The premise was compromised, and the person, trusting their own mind, doesn't question the foundation because the architecture built on top of it is so convincing. There is a specific vulnerability that compounds the above in people who have been told and have come to believe that their intelligence is exceptional. The investment in that self-concept creates a blind spot that is ruthlessly exploitable. If you can make someone believe that doubting you is evidence of intellectual limitations, that suspicion is unsophisticated. That certainty is the mark of a refined mind. You have effectively disabled the primary protective mechanism. This is a technique deployed with precision in certain influence contexts. The implication, never stated directly, that skepticism here would reveal a mind that cannot operate at the required level. The intelligent person, unwilling to be seen as the one who doesn't understand, adjusts their skepticism downward, and the vulnerability opens. Intelligent people tend to have a strong drive toward narrative coherence, the need for a consistent, logical explanation of events that fits together without contradiction. This is a cognitive preference that can be weaponized with precision. Once a belief is established as part of the coherent narrative, any information that contradicts it will be experienced not as new data, but as a threat to the structure. The intelligent mind, protecting its coherent model, will work to discredit, reframe, or dismiss the contradicting information rather than update the model. This is known in behavioral science as belief perseverance, and it intensifies with intelligence. Not because intelligent people are more stubborn, but because they are more capable of generating convincing reasons to maintain a position that is already compromised. Here is a specific cognitive error that appears at high rates in intelligent individuals. The assumption that stated intention is sufficient evidence of actual motivation. Intelligent people tend to analyze communication, to process the words, the logic, the apparent coherence of a position. What they are often less equipped to analyze is the behavior pattern running beneath the words. Because analyzing behavior requires a different kind of attention than analyzing argument. A sophisticated manipulator who can construct a plausible, internally consistent explanation for their behavior, who can give you a reason that makes sense, will routinely pass the scrutiny of a highly intelligent observer who has been trained to evaluate reasons rather than patterns. The argument is evaluated. The pattern is missed. Flattery aimed at intelligence is one of the oldest vectors in the influence toolkit, and it remains devastatingly effective because the intelligent person is rarely flattered in a way that feels cheap. It doesn't arrive as "you're so smart." It arrives as deference, as the behavior of being genuinely listened to, taken seriously, engaged with as an intellectual equal. It arrives as challenge, the kind of intellectual sparring that signals respect. It arrives as complexity, the sense that this person is operating at a level that demands the same level in return. All of these register to the intelligent person, not as flattery, but as accurate recognition. An accurate recognition generates trust, and trust disables the evaluation of the thing that generated it. When you layer these vulnerabilities together, the rationalization engines, the narrative coherence drive, the ego protection around self-concept, the over-indexing on stated reason, the susceptibility to intellectual flattery, what you have is a person who is extraordinarily difficult to influence through crude means and extraordinarily susceptible to sophisticated ones. This is the compound effect. It is why manipulation that would fail immediately on an average person can run for months or years on a high-functioning individual. The same intelligence that would detect a simple deception produces the justifications that sustain a complex one. The mind, trusted absolutely, becomes the instrument of its own compromise. Protection against this does not look like additional intelligence. It does not look like reading more, reasoning more carefully, or building a more sophisticated internal model. It looks like humility about the limits of your own reasoning, particularly in contexts involving high stakes, strong emotion, or someone who seems to understand you at an unusually deep level. It looks like attending to the pattern of behavior over time, rather than evaluating each individual instance in isolation. It looks like cultivating a tolerance for the discomfort of not having a complete explanation, because the pressure to achieve explanatory closure is exactly the pressure that gets exploited. The protection is not more thinking, it is a different relationship to your own conclusions. The most sophisticated observers, the ones who are genuinely difficult to operate, are not the most confident ones. They are the ones who have developed an unusual tolerance for ambiguity, who can hold a model loosely enough to update it when the pattern contradicts it, who have learned to treat their own certainty as a signal worth examining rather than a destination worth defending. Intelligence, unmoored from epistemic humility, becomes a closed system, one that processes inputs in service of its existing structure rather than in service of truth. The correction is not less intelligence. It is the recognition that the mind is always generating a map, and that the map can be wrong about the territory, most dangerously when it is most convinced that it isn't.